Imagine an ocean so calm it looks harmless, until you realize it's slowly running out of air, heating itself like a forgotten soup, and filling its depths with toxic gas that smells like planetary betrayal. No asteroid, no monster, just chemistry, time, and a few bad feedback loops quietly turning Earth's greatest life support system into a biological no-entry zone. Entire ecosystems vanished, survivors learned to breathe poison, and evolution hit the reset button so hard it rewrote the future of life. And the strangest part, the ocean didn't do anything unusual, it just followed the rules. Stay with me, because this is the story of how Earth's own oceans nearly erased life, and what that ancient disaster might be trying to tell us today. Picture an ocean that seems almost shy, the surface barely ripples. Sunlight slides across it like a lazy cat stretching, and if you were floating there somehow, you might think you had discovered the most relaxing place Earth ever made. No storms screaming across the horizon, no giant predators leaping out of the water to audition for your nightmares. Just calm, serene, suspiciously serene, because this ocean, long before coral reefs and playful dolphins, is already sharpening its knives. It is calm in the same way a room goes quiet right before someone says, "We need to talk." Down below, the water is heavy and slow, layered like an ancient cake no one remembers baking. Life is here, yes, but it is unfamiliar and experimental. Like nature is still beta testing ideas. Soft-bodied creatures drift without urgency. Strange swimmers move with no clear plan, except not dying today. There are no applause-worthy predators yet, no elegant food chains you could diagram neatly on a classroom wall. This is an ocean still figuring itself out. And unfortunately, that means it is also very good at making terrible decisions. What makes this ocean dangerous is not some single monster lurking in the depths. There is no prehistoric shark with glowing eyes waiting to ambush the planet. The real threat is quieter, slower, and far more ruthless. It is chemistry adjusting itself without asking permission. It is heat lingering just a little too long. It is biology responding exactly as it should, which turns out to be the worst possible response. If disasters had personalities, this one would be the calm coworker who smiles politely while deleting your entire project. At first glance, everything seems stable. Water is water. Life is life. The planet spins, the sun rises, and the ocean keeps doing ocean things. But deep beneath the surface, tiny changes are stacking up. Gases dissolve differently depending on temperature. Microbes multiply when conditions favor them and stop caring about everyone else's survival. Nutrients move where currents allow them and stay put where currents fail. None of these processes are evil. They are simply doing their jobs. Unfortunately, they are all working overtime at the same moment. This is the kind of danger that does not roar, it whispers. Oxygen becomes slightly harder to find. Water layers stop mixing as freely as they once did. Life that depends on balance starts to wobble, like a chair missing just one screw. Still usable, still standing, but sit down too fast and everything collapses. The ocean does not announce this shift. There is no countdown, no dramatic music, just a slow drift toward conditions that are, from a biological standpoint, deeply unwelcoming. If you were a creature living here, you would not notice anything wrong at first. Yesterday felt fine, today feels fine, tomorrow might feel fine too. That is the trick. Extinction rarely arrives like a lightning bolt. It arrives like a subscription you forgot to cancel, quietly draining everything until one day you check your account and panic. The ocean is changing in ways that reward the simplest forms of life while punishing complexity, and complexity has no idea it is about to be ghosted by the planet. What makes this story so unsettling is that the ocean is not reacting to an invasion or a sudden catastrophe. It is responding to itself. Earth's systems are interacting, nudging one another gently but persistently, like dominoes that were set up millions of years earlier. Temperature influences chemistry. Chemistry reshapes biology. Biology alters the environment further. The ocean becomes a feedback machine, and it is terrible at knowing when to stop. This is not a murder mystery. It is a tragic misunderstanding where everyone did exactly what made sense at the time. There is also a strange irony here. Water is usually life's greatest ally. It stabilizes temperature, it carries nutrients, it cushions ecosystems from sudden shocks. Yet in this ancient chapter of Earth's story, the ocean becomes a trap. Once conditions slide in the wrong direction, the sheer size of the sea works against life. Problems do not dissipate easily. They linger, spread, and sink. The ocean remembers, and it holds grudges in chemical form. By the time danger becomes obvious, it is already too late. The systems that once supported life are now actively undermining it. The ocean has crossed an invisible line, and crossing back is not as simple as wishing for better days. This is the moment where the planet quietly clears its throat and prepares to rewrite the rules of survival. The peaceful surface remains unchanged, still reflecting sunlight, still pretending everything is fine. But below, the betrayal is complete, and the ocean is about to become one of the most hostile places life has ever tried to endure. To understand how the ocean eventually became a nightmare for life, we first have to meet it on a good day. Not a perfect day, not a modern tropical postcard kind of day, but a day when the ancient seas were still doing their job reasonably well. These oceans belonged to a very different Earth. Continents were scattered like puzzle pieces from entirely different boxes. Coastlines twisted in unfamiliar ways, and shallow seas covered huge portions of the planet. If you tried to recognize this world on a map, you would fail spectacularly and then question your education. The water itself was not the bright, oxygen-rich blue we associate with healthy oceans today. Much of it was naturally low in oxygen, especially away from the surface. This was not a problem at first, because life had evolved to tolerate it. Marine organisms of this era were not built for speed or strength. They were built for patience. Many drifted slowly, absorbed nutrients directly from the water, or lived half buried in sediments, hoping nothing interesting happened nearby. Excitement was bad. Stability was everything. Along the coast, the scenery would have looked oddly empty to modern eyes. No coral reefs buzzing with color, no forests of kelp swaying dramatically in the current. Instead, vast, shallow seas spread over continental shelves, creating broad, quiet environments where microbial mats and simple organisms dominated. These were ecosystems run by tiny managers with no interest in innovation. Evolution was cautious, like someone testing the water with one toe for a few 100 million years. The creatures that did exist were frankly weird. Some were flat and soft, shaped like deflated air mattresses with ambitions. Others had symmetry that looked like someone forgot to finish designing them. There were organisms that crawled, oozed, or gently flapped through the water with no obvious sense of direction. If you dropped one of these animals into a modern aquarium, people would assume it was a prop from a low-budget alien movie and complain about the special effects. Predation existed, but it was subtle. No high-speed chases, no dramatic ambushes. Meals were slow negotiations. Many animals survived by being unappetizing rather than fast, relying on textures and chemicals that screamed, "Please eat literally anything else." Hard shells were still uncommon, and complex food webs had not yet taken center stage. The ocean was less of a battlefield and more of a shared workspace where everyone tried very hard not to bump into one another. Chemically, the ocean was balanced in a way that suited this simplicity. Nutrients flowed steadily from land into the sea, feeding massive populations of microscopic life. These tiny organisms formed the base of the marine ecosystem, quietly driving biological processes without fanfare. They did not need applause. They multiplied, sank, decomposed, and recycled materials in a rhythm that had worked for ages. When something changed, it usually changed slowly enough for life to adjust. Usually. The atmosphere above the ocean was also different. Oxygen levels were lower than today, but rising compared to earlier chapters of Earth's history. This gradual increase allowed more complex life to exist, but it also set limits. Many organisms still relied on diffusion rather than active circulation. Big, muscular bodies were rare. This was not yet a world built for sprinting or thinking too hard. It was a world optimized for floating, filtering, and waiting. What makes this era so important is that it represents a fragile success. Life had found a way to exist in a challenging environment by keeping things simple and steady. The ocean, for its part, was cooperating. It provided space, nutrients, and time. But this balance depended on very specific conditions. Temperature, chemistry, and circulation all needed to stay within narrow ranges. Push any one of them too far, and the entire system would start to wobble like a table on uneven legs. And here is the quiet tension beneath it all. The ocean looked stable, but it was already operating close to its limits. Oxygen was sufficient, but not abundant. Ecosystems were productive, but not resilient. Life was diverse enough to be interesting, but not robust enough to absorb major shocks. It was a world doing okay, not a world doing great. The kind of situation where everything seems fine until someone rearranges the furniture. This was the ocean before things went wrong. Not a paradise, not a hellscape, but a precarious middle ground. A place where life had learned to survive under specific rules, unaware that those rules were about to change. The stage was set, the actors were in place, and the ocean was calm. Too calm. If the ancient ocean was a carefully balanced room, plate tectonics was the person who decided to remodel it while everyone was still inside. Slowly, relentlessly, and without asking permission, Earth's crust began to move its massive pieces around like furniture on a planetary scale. These were not dramatic, overnight changes. Continents drifted at the speed your fingernails grow, which somehow makes the consequences even more terrifying. Given enough time, even the laziest motion can completely rearrange the world. As land masses shifted, the shape of the ocean itself changed. Broad, open seaways narrowed. Shallow continental shelves expanded in some regions and vanished in others. Entire ocean basins were reshaped, not by waves or storms, but by rock grinding against rock deep below the surface. This altered how water could move across the planet. Currents that once flowed freely were redirected, slowed, or cut off entirely. Imagine blocking half the vents in a house and being surprised when the air starts feeling stale. Ocean currents are not just water going for a scenic tour. They are the planet's internal delivery system. They move heat from warm regions to cooler ones, distribute nutrients, and keep different layers of the ocean in conversation with each other. When continents drifted into new positions, they disrupted this system. Water became trapped in large basins with limited circulation. These regions warmed more easily, cooled less efficiently, and held on to whatever chemistry they accumulated. The ocean stopped breathing properly, and nobody noticed at first. The positioning of continents also influenced how sunlight interacted with the seas. Vast, shallow regions absorbed heat efficiently, especially in equatorial zones. Without strong pathways to carry that heat away, these waters lingered at elevated temperatures. Warm water behaves differently than cold water. It layers more easily. It resists mixing. It encourages stagnation. The ocean, once a dynamic system of movement and exchange, began to resemble a pot left on low heat for far too long. Meanwhile, the creation of enclosed and semi-enclosed seas limited the ability of fresh water to refresh deeper regions. In open oceans, surface waters sink, deep waters rise, and gases are exchanged in a slow but steady cycle. In restricted basins, this cycle weakens. Water at depth becomes isolated, cut off from surface interactions. Whatever conditions develop down there tend to stay there. It is the aquatic equivalent of locking a door and hoping the air quality improves on its own. These tectonic changes did not happen evenly across the planet. Some regions became hubs of intense geological activity. Others turned into quiet backwaters. The unevenness mattered. It created a patchwork ocean where some areas remained relatively healthy, while others drifted toward extreme conditions. This uneven geography set the stage for instability, Because problems that start locally do not always stay local. Given enough time, water finds ways to share its troubles. What makes plate tectonics such a sneaky villain in this story is that it does not feel destructive in the moment. Mountains rise, coastlines shift, and new seas appear, all of which can create new habitats. In many cases, tectonic movement boosts biodiversity, but here, the specific arrangement of continents worked against the ocean's ability to regulate itself. The seas became compartmentalized, less flexible, and more sensitive to additional stresses. The system lost its buffer zones. From the perspective of marine life, these changes were confusing. Habitats that once connected were now separated. Migration routes altered or vanished. Populations became isolated in pockets of water with distinct conditions. Some organisms adapted to their new neighborhoods. Others found themselves trapped in environments that slowly became less forgiving. Evolution can work wonders, but it struggles when the ground rules change faster than bodies and behaviors can keep up. There is a dark humor to all of this. Earth was not trying to sabotage its oceans. It was simply doing what planets do, releasing internal heat, shifting crustal plates, and reshaping its surface. The ocean just happened to be in the wrong configuration at the wrong time. The result was a marine system increasingly prone to stagnation, warming, and imbalance. A slow cooking pot, indeed, with no easy way for heat and chemicals to escape. By the end of this tectonic rearrangement, the ocean was no longer a single, unified system. It was a collection of basins with varying degrees of isolation, each responding differently to the same planetary forces. Some were already edging toward dangerous territory. Others were holding on, unaware of what their neighbors were becoming. The stage was no longer just set. The walls had moved, the exits had narrowed, and the ocean was quietly discovering that it had painted itself into a geological corner. At some point, the ocean stopped feeling merely awkward and started feeling uncomfortable. This was not because of a sudden inferno or a dramatic spike in heat, but because warmth crept in and refused to leave. Greenhouse gases accumulated in the atmosphere, trapping heat with the enthusiasm of an overzealous blanket. The planet warmed, and the ocean, being very good at absorbing heat, took most of it without complaint. Unfortunately, the ocean never forgets. Heat stored in water tends to linger, and this slow buildup changed everything. As temperatures rose, the surface of the ocean warmed first. Warm water is lighter than cold water, so it floats. This created stronger layering between surface and deeper waters. The boundary between these layers became harder to cross, like an invisible ceiling pressing down on the depths below. The ocean began to stratify more intensely, and once that happens, exchange between layers slows dramatically. Think of it as thermal awkwardness. Nobody wants to mingle, and everyone stays in their own corner. This warming had an immediate chemical consequence that marine life did not appreciate. Warm water holds less dissolved oxygen than cold water. It is not personal, it is physics. As temperatures increase, oxygen molecules are less willing to stay dissolved. They escape more easily back into the atmosphere. The result was a gradual decline in the amount of oxygen available to organisms living in the water, especially those that relied on diffusion or had limited mobility. Breathing became harder, not because oxygen vanished entirely, but because it became annoyingly scarce. For marine organisms already living near their physiological limits, this was a serious problem. Metabolism speeds up in warmer conditions, increasing the demand for oxygen at the exact moment oxygen becomes less available. It is the biological equivalent of asking someone to sprint while slowly tightening a scarf around their neck. Some organisms try to adapt by slowing their activity. Others altered their behavior, retreating to cooler or shallower waters when possible. Many simply could not keep up. The warming ocean also disrupted seasonal patterns that life had come to rely on. Temperature cues often regulate growth, reproduction, and movement. When those cues blur or shift, timing falls apart. Organisms release larvae into waters that are no longer favorable. Feeding cycles drift out of sync. Growth rates become unpredictable. The ocean turns from a predictable calendar into a confusing guessing game where the rules change mid-round. What makes this phase especially cruel is that the warming itself was not evenly distributed. Some regions heated faster than others, creating thermal hotspots. These zones became physiological stress tests for marine life. Species that had once occupied broad ranges found their habitable zones shrinking. Margins became lethal. Core habitats became barely tolerable. Life did not just lose space, it lost options. When everything feels warm, there is nowhere cool to escape to. There is also a subtle but important psychological element here. If oceans could feel anxiety, warm, stratified waters are quieter in a troubling way. Less mixing means fewer disturbances, fewer pulses of fresh conditions. Stagnation sets in. Nutrients and gases stop circulating efficiently. The ocean becomes stable in the worst sense of the word, locked into conditions that favor stress over resilience. Change becomes harder, not easier, and recovery slows to a crawl. Marine life responded in creative ways. Some organisms reduced their size because smaller bodies require less oxygen. Others altered their life cycles, reproducing faster to compensate for higher mortality. A few opportunistic species thrived in the warmth, expanding rapidly and outcompeting more delicate neighbors. These winners were often simple, hardy forms of life that cared little for balance or biodiversity. They flourished not because the ocean was healthy, but because it was failing. The humor, if we can call it that, lies in how misleading warmth can be. Warmth usually signals abundance and productivity. In this case, it was a trap. The ocean felt inviting at first, like a bath drawn just a bit too hot. Stay in long enough though, and it becomes exhausting. Life began to realize that this new thermal regime was not a temporary inconvenience. It was the new normal, and the normal was hostile. By the end of this chapter in Earth's history, the ocean was warmer, more layered, and less breathable than it had been before. These changes alone did not kill everything, but they pushed marine ecosystems closer to a tipping point. The sauna was on, the doors were closing, and the ocean was quietly preparing to find out who could take the heat and who would be boiled out of existence. Once the ocean warmed and layered itself into distinct thermal tiers, its internal motion began to change in subtle but devastating ways. Circulation is the ocean's heartbeat. It is how surface waters communicate with the depths, how fresh conditions replace exhausted ones, and how life-supporting ingredients are shared across thousands of kilometers. When that heartbeat weakens, the ocean does not collapse immediately. It grows tired, sluggish, less responsive, and that is exactly what began to happen. Currents that once connected distant regions slowed as density differences between water layers became more pronounced. Surface waters, warmed and buoyant, resisted sinking. Deeper waters, colder and heavier, stayed put. This resistance acted like friction in the system, draining energy from circulation patterns that had persisted for ages. The result was an ocean increasingly divided against itself, with little vertical movement to refresh the depths. Without regular mixing, deep waters became isolated from the surface. This isolation mattered enormously. The surface is where interaction with the atmosphere occurs, where gases enter and leave the ocean, and where photosynthetic life produces fresh organic material. When deep waters are cut off from this zone, they stop receiving those benefits. They become chemical time capsules, preserving whatever conditions exist when circulation slows. Over time, those conditions tend to worsen. As circulation weakened, vast regions of the deep ocean slipped into stillness. Darkness had always ruled the depths, but now stagnation joined it. Water remained in place for long stretches, allowing waste products to accumulate and usable resources to diminish. Decomposition continued, consuming what little oxygen remained, but nothing arrived to replace it. The deep ocean turned into a one-way system. Materials went in, but nothing valuable came back out. This stagnation did not stay neatly confined to the deepest zones. As layers thickened and mixing weakened, the boundary between habitable and hostile waters crept upward. Zones that had once been marginal became dangerous. dangerous zones became lethal. Marine organisms that relied on occasional contact with deeper waters for nutrients or refuge found those pathways blocked. The vertical dimension of the ocean, once a lifeline, became a liability. Circulation failure also disrupted horizontal connections. Currents that once transported larvae, food, and chemical signals across ocean basins lost strength. Populations became increasingly isolated, trapped in local conditions with no relief. Evolution likes connected systems. Isolation narrows options, reduces genetic diversity, and turns environmental stress into an existential threat. The ocean was no longer a network. It was a collection of disconnected rooms with the lights slowly going out. There is a bleak irony in how quiet this transformation was. No massive waves announced the failure of circulation. No visible marker appeared on the surface. From above, the ocean still looked alive. Sunlight still danced across it. But below, entire regions were slipping into suffocating stillness. The ocean was not dead, but it was falling asleep in the most dangerous way possible. For organisms living near these stagnant zones, survival required constant adjustment. Some attempted to stay close to the surface, where conditions were slightly better. Others ventured deeper out of necessity and paid the price. Behavioral strategies that once worked became liabilities. The ocean no longer rewarded exploration or movement. It punished it. Safety lay in narrow bands of water that shrank year by year. The failure of circulation also altered how energy moved through the ocean. Organic material produced near the surface continued to sink, but instead of being recycled efficiently, it accumulated in deep, stagnant waters. This buildup fueled microbial processes that thrived in still, resource-rich environments. These microbes did not need circulation. In fact, they preferred its absence. The ocean was quietly selecting for life forms that flourished in isolation and decay, rather than balance and renewal. At this point, the ocean was no longer a dynamic, self-correcting system. It had become rigid, resistant to change. Once regions entered stagnation, they stayed that way for long periods. Recovery would have required significant disruption, but the same conditions that caused stagnation also suppressed the forces that might have reversed it. The ocean had locked itself into a dangerous configuration. By the end of this chapter, vast areas of the sea existed in a state of suffocating darkness, not because light could not reach them, but because movement could not. Circulation had faltered, and with it went the ocean's ability to sustain complex life across its depths. The betrayal was no longer theoretical. It was physical, measurable, and spreading silently through the world's waters. At some point, the ocean crossed a line so subtle it barely registered at first. Oxygen did not vanish overnight. There was no collective gasp, no cinematic moment where everything clutched its gills and panicked. Instead, oxygen slipped away quietly, like a feature update nobody asked for, but everyone was forced to live with. The water still looked the same. Life still moved. But breathing, as a reliable process, was becoming optional in the worst possible way. Oxygen in the ocean exists in a delicate balance between supply and demand. It enters surface waters from the atmosphere and is used up by organisms as they respire and decompose organic material. Under healthy conditions, circulation and mixing keep this balance intact. But once those processes weakened, demand began to outpace supply. Oxygen was consumed faster than it could be replaced, especially at depth. Over time, entire regions slipped into anoxic conditions, meaning oxygen levels dropped to effectively zero. This was not just uncomfortable, it was catastrophic. Most complex marine organisms rely on oxygen to fuel their metabolism. Without it, cells cannot produce energy efficiently. Muscles weaken, organs fail, growth slows, reproduction becomes erratic. Eventually, survival becomes impossible. The cruel twist is that many organisms did not die suddenly. They lingered in low oxygen waters, functioning just well enough to realize that something was deeply wrong. Different species experienced this decline in different ways. Some attempted to flee, migrating toward areas where oxygen was still present. Others reduced their activity, conserving energy in a desperate attempt to ride out the shortage. A few could tolerate low oxygen for short periods, but even they had limits. Anoxia is not a challenge you adapt to easily. It is a wall, and once you hit it, there is no evolutionary workaround fast enough to matter. As oxygen levels dropped, the structure of marine ecosystems began to change. Large active animals were hit first. They had higher oxygen demands and fewer options. Slower, simpler organisms lasted longer, especially those that could survive with minimal respiration. The ocean began to favor life forms that required less energy and produced less motion. Complexity became a liability. Efficiency, not elegance, was now the winning strategy. There is something especially unsettling about anoxic oceans because they fail silently. No bubbles, no visual warning signs. From above, the sea still shimmered under the sun. But below, the water was becoming hostile in a way that could not be seen, only felt by the organisms trapped inside it. Fish did not thrash or struggle dramatically. They simply slowed, grew lethargic, and eventually stopped functioning. It was not drowning, it was suffocation by omission. Anoxia also reshaped where life could exist vertically. Habitable zones compressed toward the surface, creating narrow layers where oxygen was barely sufficient. These zones became overcrowded, increasing competition for space and resources. Predators and prey were forced into closer proximity, intensifying ecological pressure. The ocean turned into a biological bottleneck, squeezing life into thinner and thinner bands of survivable water. At the same time, decomposition continued unabated. Dead organisms sank into oxygen-poor depths, where their breakdown consumed what little oxygen remained. This created a vicious cycle. The more life died, the more oxygen was used up processing the remains. Death fed further death. The ocean was no longer recycling efficiently. It was accumulating problems faster than it could resolve them. What makes anoxia especially devastating is that it undermines recovery. Once oxygen disappears from a region, it becomes much harder to reintroduce it. Without circulation and mixing, fresh oxygen cannot penetrate deeply. Even if surface conditions improve, deeper waters remain trapped in a chemical limbo. The ocean develops memory, and that memory is hostile. Anoxic zones persist long after the initial causes fade, continuing to exclude complex life. By this stage, the ocean was no longer just stressed. It was actively unlivable across vast areas. The loss of oxygen stripped ecosystems down to their barest components, removing mobility, diversity, and resilience. Life did not end everywhere, but it retreated into refuges that were few and fragile. The sea had become a place where breathing was no longer guaranteed, and in evolutionary terms, that is about as dangerous as it gets. When oxygen disappeared from large portions of the ocean, it did not leave a vacuum. Nature hates vacancies. Where one metabolic strategy fails, another steps in, stretches, and gets comfortable. In this case, the winners were microbes that had been waiting patiently for their moment, tucked away in sediments and dark corners, living quiet lives under conditions most organisms would consider unacceptable. These bacteria did not need oxygen. In fact, oxygen was their enemy. What they needed was sulfur, and the ocean was happy to provide it. In oxygen-free waters, sulfur compounds became the next best option for respiration. Sulfate, abundant in seawater, turned into a chemical goldmine for microbes capable of using it. These sulfur-reducing bacteria began to thrive, breaking down organic matter and using sulfate instead of oxygen to fuel their metabolism. The byproduct of this process was hydrogen sulfide, a gas that is both chemically reactive and lethally toxic to most complex life. This was not just a minor inconvenience, it was a full-on environmental insult. Hydrogen sulfide has a reputation, and it has earned it. Even in small amounts, it interferes with cellular respiration, by shutting down critical enzymes. Cells exposed to it cannot use oxygen effectively, even if oxygen is present. In higher concentrations, it becomes rapidly fatal. For marine organisms already struggling with low oxygen, hydrogen sulfide was the final straw. It did not just make breathing difficult, it made breathing useless. As these bacteria multiplied, hydrogen sulfide accumulated in the water, especially in deeper, stagnant regions. The gas did not disperse easily because circulation was weak and mixing was limited. Instead, it pooled and lingered, creating zones that were chemically hostile in ways that went far beyond simple oxygen deprivation. These waters were not just anoxic, they were poisonous. Life entering them was not merely stressed, it was chemically attacked. The presence of hydrogen sulfide also altered the physical appearance of the ocean. It reacted with dissolved metals, producing dark compounds that stained sediments and water columns. Entire regions took on a murky, ominous character. This was not the darkness of depth alone. It was the darkness of chemistry gone wrong. If the ocean had warning signs, this would have been the moment to post them. From the perspective of the bacteria, this was a golden age. They faced little competition and abundant resources. Organic materials sank from above, providing a steady food supply. Without oxygen, many predators and competitors were gone. The environment selected strongly in their favor. These microbes expanded rapidly, forming dense populations that further reinforced the chemical conditions they preferred. The ocean was no longer neutral territory. It was actively being remodeled by microbial life. For larger organisms, this shift was devastating. Hydrogen sulfide penetrated tissues easily, disrupting nervous systems and muscle function. Animals that wandered into sulfide-rich waters did not have time to adapt or escape. Death was swift and unceremonious. Even organisms that could tolerate low oxygen found themselves powerless against this new threat. The ocean had moved from suffocation to poisoning, escalating the crisis dramatically. There is a grim irony here. These bacteria were not invaders. They were part of the ocean all along, performing useful roles under limited conditions. They helped recycle nutrients and break down waste in small, contained environments. But when those environments expanded, so did their influence. What was once a background process became a dominant force. The ocean had accidentally handed control to organisms that excelled in decay and toxicity. The rise of hydrogen sulfide also reshaped ecological boundaries. Regions that were already marginal became absolute dead zones. Transition zones formed sharp chemical gradients where survivable water sat directly above lethal layers. Crossing those boundaries meant instant consequences. The ocean developed invisible traps, where a slight change in depth could mean the difference between life and death. By the end of this phase, the ocean was no longer just low in oxygen, it was actively hostile to complex biology. Sulfur-loving bacteria had transformed vast stretches of seawater into toxic environments that favored microbes and excluded almost everything else. The smell alone, if anyone had been around to notice it, would have been unforgettable. Rotten eggs, multiplied by planetary scale. And this was only the beginning of how dangerous that gas would become. Hydrogen sulfide did not politely stay where it was produced. Gases, much like rumors, have a tendency to travel once conditions allow it. As toxic waters expanded and thickened, hydrogen sulfide began to creep beyond the deep, stagnant zones where it was born. Chemical boundaries blurred. Layers that had once separated dangerous water from merely unpleasant water weakened. The ocean was no longer compartmentalized. Toxicity was on the move. Within the sea itself, hydrogen sulfide spread laterally and vertically, infiltrating regions that had previously escaped its reach. Currents were weak, but diffusion does not require enthusiasm. Over long timescales, even slow movement is enough. Sulfide-rich waters pushed into continental shelves, slopes, and mid-depth zones that once supported more diverse life. Organisms that had survived oxygen loss by staying shallow or mobile found that the poison had followed them. Refuge became harder to find. This gas did not merely kill directly. It altered behavior before it altered survival. Exposure caused disorientation, impaired movement, and disrupted sensory systems. Animals became sluggish, uncoordinated, and vulnerable. Predators failed to hunt effectively. Prey failed to escape. Entire ecological interactions unraveled, not because participants disappeared instantly, but because their biology stopped working properly. The ocean became a place where even surviving organisms could no longer behave like themselves. As sulfide concentrations increased near the surface in some regions, a more alarming possibility emerged. Hydrogen sulfide is volatile. Under the right conditions, it can escape from water into the air. If sulfide-rich waters reached shallow depths or were disturbed by mixing events, the gas could bubble upward and enter the atmosphere. This was not a constant release everywhere, but it did not need to be. Even episodic bursts would have been enough to matter. Once in the atmosphere, hydrogen sulfide would have had dramatic effects. It is toxic to animals that breathe air, just as it is to those that breathe water. High concentrations can cause rapid respiratory failure. Even lower levels irritate tissues and disrupt metabolism. For life, near coastlines or shallow seas, this would have turned the air itself into a hazard. Imagine surviving the ocean's collapse only to discover the breeze is trying to kill you. Not ideal. There is also the matter of chemistry above the surface. Hydrogen sulfide reacts readily with sunlight and other atmospheric components. These reactions can alter the composition of the atmosphere in ways that affect climate and radiation exposure. The gas does not just smell bad, it is chemically aggressive. Its presence would have changed how the atmosphere interacted with incoming solar energy, potentially amplifying stress on ecosystems already pushed to their limits. From a planetary perspective, this was an escalation. The crisis was no longer confined to the ocean. The boundary between sea and sky had been breached. Earth's systems were now interfering with one another in new and dangerous ways. The ocean was exporting its problems upward, and the atmosphere was not equipped to absorb them harmlessly. The planet was entering a feedback loop where damage in one system amplified damage in another. The dark humor in all of this is unavoidable. Hydrogen sulfide is infamous for its smell, often compared to rotten eggs. On a planetary scale, the idea of Earth belching toxic gas into its own atmosphere sounds absurd, like a cosmic joke gone too far. But the consequences were anything but funny. This was not an inconvenience you could wave away with a window fan. It was a chemical assault with global reach. Marine ecosystems suffered first and most severely. As sulfide spread, biodiversity collapsed in waves. Survivors clustered in shrinking safe zones, only to be overtaken as conditions worsened. Each expansion of toxic waters erased more complexity. The ocean was no longer selecting for resilience or adaptability. It was selecting for tolerance to poison, a trait few complex organisms possess. What makes this chapter especially grim is the sense of inevitability. Once hydrogen sulfide production reached sufficient scale, its spread was difficult to prevent. Weak circulation, layered waters, and ongoing microbial activity ensured a steady supply. Even temporary improvements in conditions would not have eliminated the gas already present. The ocean had crossed into a state where toxicity reinforced itself. By this point, the planet had earned its reputation as a dangerous place for life. The seas were poisoned, the air was threatened. Earth had become a world where survival depended not just on biology, but on avoiding entire regions of chemistry. The planetary fart joke had landed, and it came with consequences that life would not soon forget. As if toxic gases and missing oxygen were not enough, the ocean found yet another way to make life uncomfortable. Carbon dioxide, already abundant in the atmosphere, dissolved readily into seawater. This was not new. Oceans have always absorbed carbon dioxide. What changed was the amount and the timing. With so much gas entering the water and fewer mechanisms available to buffer its effects, seawater chemistry began to shift in a direction that quietly undermined life's architecture. When carbon dioxide dissolves in water, It forms carbonic acid. This weak acid releases hydrogen ions, lowering the pH of the water. The change does not need to be dramatic to matter. Even small shifts in acidity can alter chemical equilibria in ways that affect biological processes. In this ancient ocean, the pH drifted downward enough to interfere with the formation and stability of calcium-based structures. For organisms that relied on shells or skeletal supports, this was a nightmare disguised as chemistry homework. Many marine organisms built their bodies by extracting calcium and carbonate ions from seawater, assembling them into hard parts for protection, support, or feeding. These structures were not decorative. They were essential. Shells deterred predators. Skeletons provided muscle attachment and shape. When acidity increased, carbonate ions became harder to access, and existing structures became more prone to dissolution. It was as if the ocean started gently unbuilding life one molecule at a time. For creatures with thin or delicate shells, the effects were immediate. Growth slowed, repairs became costly. Juveniles struggled to develop properly. Adults carried visible damage, cracks, and deformities. These were not fatal on their own, but they made organisms more vulnerable to everything else going wrong. In a world already low on oxygen and high on toxins, losing structural integrity was the last thing anyone needed. The real cruelty of acidification lies in its invisibility. You cannot see pH with your eyes. There is no warning color change, no dramatic clouding of the water. Organisms simply find that the materials they depend on no longer behave as expected. It is like trying to build a house, only to discover that gravity has been turned up slightly, and the bricks keep crumbling. Technically possible, practically miserable. Acidification also interfered with sensory systems. Many marine animals rely on chemical cues to find food, avoid danger, and locate mates. Changes in water chemistry altered how these cues moved and were perceived. Signals became weaker, distorted, or misleading. Animals struggled to navigate their environment effectively. Even those that survived physiologically faced a world that no longer made sense. The ocean was chemically gaslighting its inhabitants. The impact rippled through ecosystems. Shell-building organisms often played foundational roles, forming habitats or stabilizing sediments. As they declined, the environments they supported deteriorated. Spaces that once sheltered smaller organisms disappeared. Feeding grounds eroded. The physical structure of ecosystems weakened, making them less capable of supporting diversity. Acidification did not just harm individuals, it destabilized entire communities. There is a tragic irony in the timing. Acidification intensified when many organisms were already under severe stress from other environmental changes. Their energy budgets were stretched thin. Repairing shells and maintaining internal chemistry required resources they no longer had. Trade-offs became unavoidable. Grow or reproduce, repair damage or move. Every choice carried a cost, and there were no good options left. Some organisms attempted to adapt by reducing their reliance on hard structures. Others changed their life cycles, reproducing earlier or more frequently to compensate for higher mortality. These strategies offered limited relief. Acidification was not a challenge that rewarded creativity. It was a persistent background pressure that slowly ground down resilience. Fragile underwater snow globes, indeed, shaken repeatedly until something cracked. By this stage, the ocean had become chemically complex in all the wrong ways. Toxic gases, missing oxygen, and now corrosive water combined to create an environment hostile to complexity. Life that depended on stability, structure, and long-term investment found itself at a severe disadvantage. The ocean was no longer just a place where survival was difficult. It was a place actively dismantling the tools life used to exist. Acidification did not deliver a single dramatic blow. It worked patiently, persistently, eroding the foundations of marine life, while other forces finished the job. Together, These changes transformed the ocean into a place where being delicate was dangerous and being complex was a liability. The snow globes shattered, and the ocean did not pause to clean up the mess. Eventually, the ocean reached a point where survival was no longer a matter of clever adaptation or bad luck. It became a numbers game, and the numbers were not in life's favor. Species began to disappear, not in isolated incidents, but in waves. This was not the dramatic snap of a single catastrophe. It was a long, grinding erasure, where lineages that had persisted for millions of years quietly ended without ceremony. The ocean did not explode, it emptied. The first to go were the specialists. Organisms finely tuned to narrow conditions found themselves trapped when those conditions vanished. Creatures dependent on specific habitats, precise chemistry, or stable interactions simply ran out of room to maneuver. Their evolutionary strategies, once successful, became liabilities. Nature does not reward loyalty to a vanished environment, and these species paid the price for their commitment. Next came the structurally delicate groups, organisms that invested heavily in shells, skeletons, or elaborate body plans struggled to maintain them. Damage accumulated faster than it could be repaired. Reproduction slowed. Juveniles failed to mature. Over generations, populations thinned until they crossed an invisible threshold where recovery was no longer possible. These species did not lose in a dramatic showdown. They faded, one unsuccessful generation at a time. Mobile predators also suffered disproportionately. Active lifestyles demand energy, coordination, and reliable food webs. As prey declined and environmental stress mounted, many predators found themselves chasing meals that no longer existed. Size, once an advantage, became a burden. Large bodies required resources the ocean could no longer provide. Apex predators, often icons of their ecosystems, vanished with startling efficiency. Meanwhile, some groups clung to survival by the thinnest of margins. These were often small, opportunistic organisms with flexible diets and simple body plans. They reproduced quickly, tolerated harsh conditions, and did not require elaborate structures to function. Survival did not mean thriving. It meant persisting just enough to avoid extinction. Evolution was not advancing boldly during this period. It was crouched behind a rock, hoping the worst would pass. Certain microbial communities expanded dramatically, filling ecological space left vacant by collapsing animal populations. These organisms did not replace what was lost in any meaningful way. They did not rebuild complex food webs or restore balance. They simply occupied space and consumed resources. From an evolutionary perspective, this was a holding pattern. Life continued, but innovation stalled. Complexity retreated. The fossil record from this interval tells a sobering story. Diversity drops sharply. Long-standing groups disappear abruptly from the record. Others linger briefly before vanishing. Survivors show signs of stress, reduced size, and simplified forms. It is as if evolution, overwhelmed by environmental chaos, decided to simplify the problem by erasing half the options. This extinction was not evenly distributed. Some regions suffered near total collapse, while others functioned as fragile refuges. These pockets of survival were not safe havens, so much as temporary shelters. Life there existed in a constant state of tension, one environmental shift away from joining the rest of the casualties. The ocean became a patchwork of emptiness and desperation. What makes this mass extinction especially striking is how little drama it seems to have involved. There were no towering impacts, no sudden planetary resets, just a series of interconnected stresses that compounded until ecosystems unraveled. The ocean did not scream, it sighed repeatedly until silence spread. Evolution, under normal circumstances, thrives on change, variation, selection, adaptation. During this interval, however, change came too fast and too broadly. There was no stable target for adaptation to aim at. Traits that help one generation became useless in the next. Evolutionary pathways closed faster than new ones could open. It was not that life failed to adapt, it was that adaptation itself became unreliable. By the end of this extinction phase, the ocean was a shadow of its former self. Food webs were truncated, ecological roles went unfilled. The diversity that once buffered ecosystems against collapse was gone. Life persisted, yes, but it did so cautiously, stripped down to essentials. The planet had hit a reset button, not with a bang, but with a prolonged, uncomfortable pause. This was the moment where Earth's evolutionary story took a breath, a long one, as if the planet looked at the mess it had made and muttered, "I need a minute." And for the organisms that did not survive that minute, there would be no sequel. After the mass extinction thinned the ocean's cast of characters, what remained faced a quieter but equally lethal problem. The system that connected survivors to food began to unravel. Food webs are not just lists of who eats whom, they are networks of timing, availability, and energy transfer. When enough strands snap, the whole structure sags. In this ancient ocean, the snapping started at the base. Plankton, those microscopic drifters that convert sunlight and nutrients into living matter, took a heavy hit. Some groups declined because conditions no longer favored their growth. Others vanished because the chemistry of the water interfered with their metabolism. Plankton are resilient, but they are also sensitive to subtle environmental changes. When their populations faltered, the consequences rippled upward almost immediately. With fewer plankton available, small grazers struggled. These organisms formed the crucial bridge between microscopic producers and larger animals. Their decline meant that energy stalled near the bottom of the food web. It was not destroyed, just stuck, like money trapped in a frozen account. Higher levels of the ecosystem found themselves short on calories, even if some prey species technically still existed. Reef builders suffered as well, and their loss removed more than food. Reefs provide structure, shelter, and feeding grounds for countless organisms. Without them, ecosystems flattened. Hiding places vanished, breeding sites eroded, juvenile survival plummeted. The ocean lost its three-dimensional complexity, becoming a more dangerous place for anything small enough to be eaten. As habitats simplified, interactions changed. Predators encountered prey less frequently, and when they did, the prey was often smaller or less nutritious than before. Energy intake dropped below what was needed to sustain large bodies and active lifestyles. Apex predators did not collapse instantly. They endured, relying on fat reserves and flexibility. But starvation is patient. It does not rush. It waits. Lower down the food chain, scavengers initially benefited from increased mortality. There were more carcasses, more organic leftovers drifting through the water. This brief abundance was misleading. It masked the deeper problem that production had declined. Once the backlog of dead material was consumed, nothing replaced it. The system was eating itself, living off past success rather than present productivity. Competition intensified among survivors. With limited resources, species that once coexisted peacefully found themselves in constant conflict. Diets overlapped, territories shrank, aggressive behaviors increased. The ocean became less cooperative and more cutthroat, not because animals became crueler, but because scarcity leaves no room for politeness. Apex predators, often insulated from short-term fluctuations, eventually felt the full force of the collapse. Their prey base had eroded to the point where hunting no longer paid off energetically. Each chase burned more calories than it provided. Bodies weakened. Immune systems faltered. Reproduction failed. These predators did not go extinct in dramatic battles. They starved slowly, quietly, with dignity that nature did not acknowledge. The loss of top predators further destabilized ecosystems. Predation pressure often keeps populations balanced. Without it, some species experienced brief population booms, only to crash when resources ran out. Boom and bust cycles replaced stability. The ocean lurched from imbalance to imbalance, unable to settle into a new equilibrium. What makes food web collapse especially devastating is that it removes pathways for recovery. Even if conditions improve, rebuilding a complex network takes time. Producers must rebound, consumers must re-establish relationships, predators must return last. In this ancient ocean, the collapse was so thorough that recovery pathways were fragmented. The system could not simply snap back. The buffet analogy fits uncomfortably well. When the tables emptied, everyone felt it, from the tiniest grazer to the largest hunter. No amount of evolutionary bravado can overcome the basic need for calories. Life requires energy, and when the flow of energy breaks down, biology grinds to a halt. By the end of this phase, the ocean was not just less diverse, it was less functional. The connections that once allowed energy to move smoothly through ecosystems were broken. Survivors existed in a stripped-down world where every meal mattered and every missed opportunity brought extinction closer. The ocean had lost its appetite for complexity, and it was starving itself in the process. While much of the ocean collapsed under the weight of chemical chaos, the deep sea followed a slightly different script. This might seem surprising, given that the deep ocean already lived in darkness, cold, and crushing pressure. But those very conditions had prepared its inhabitants for hardship. When the upper layers of the ocean became hostile, the deep sea did not panic. It adjusted, slowly and selectively, doing what it has always done best, enduring. Deep sea organisms were already accustomed to low-energy environments. Food arrived sporadically, often as sinking debris from above. As a result, many species had evolved slow metabolisms, minimal movement, and extraordinary efficiency. When oxygen levels declined and toxic compounds increased, these traits became advantages. While fast, oxygen-hungry organisms struggled, deep sea life leaned into its natural patience. Some organisms altered their biochemistry to tolerate lower oxygen availability. Instead of relying on continuous respiration, they adopted metabolic pathways that functioned intermittently or at reduced intensity. Energy production slowed, but it did not stop. Life in the deep sea was never about speed, it was about persistence. These organisms essentially downshifted, running on biological economy mode. Others developed ways to isolate themselves from toxic conditions, burrowing deeper into sediments or occupying microhabitats with slightly better chemistry provided temporary relief. In some cases, symbiotic relationships emerged between animals and microbes. Certain microbes processed toxic compounds, creating localized zones that were marginally safer. These partnerships were not glamorous, but they worked. Survival does not require elegance, just adequacy. The deep sea also benefited from a degree of isolation. Many toxic processes intensified closer to the surface or in specific water layers, while no part of the ocean was truly untouched. Some deep regions experienced slower changes. This delay mattered. It gave populations time to adjust, gradually, rather than being overwhelmed all at once. Evolution prefers slow problems. It struggles with sudden ones. Body plans in the deep sea reflected this resilience. Many organisms lacked hard skeletons, reducing vulnerability to corrosive conditions. Soft tissues, while seemingly fragile, can be more adaptable chemically. Others possess protective coatings or specialized proteins that help stabilize cellular functions under stress. These adaptations did not make life comfortable, they made it possible. Reproduction strategies also shifted. In unpredictable environments, producing fewer offspring with higher survival chances can be more effective than releasing vast numbers into hostile conditions. Some deep-sea species invested heavily in each offspring, providing nutrients and protection that increased the odds of success. Evolution, faced with limited options, became cautious rather than ambitious. There is a strange optimism in this chapter of the story. While surface ecosystems unraveled, the deep sea demonstrated that life does not require ideal conditions to persist. It requires consistency, however grim. Darkness, pressure, and chemical stress became constants rather than shocks. In that stability, however unpleasant, life found footing. This does not mean the deep sea thrived. Diversity declined, Many species disappeared, but total collapse was avoided. The deep ocean became a refuge not because it was safe, but because it was predictably unsafe. There were no sudden swings, no dramatic betrayals. The rules were harsh, but they were known. The humor here writes itself. Conditions that would cancel any reasonable vacation plan: no oxygen, toxic gases, freezing temperatures, crushing pressure, became the settings where life held on. If resilience had a mascot, it would be a deep-sea organism calmly going about its business while the rest of the planet panicked. The deep-sea's survival also preserved evolutionary potential. These organisms carried genetic solutions forged under extreme conditions. When the planet eventually stabilized, these lineages would serve as seeds for future diversification. Endurance, it turns out, can be just as important as innovation. By responding differently, the deep sea avoided total annihilation. It became a living archive of survival strategies, proof that life can persist even when the planet seems determined to make existence inconvenient. In a world gone hostile, stubbornness was the most valuable trait of all. Long after the toxic waters receded and life clawed its way forward, the ocean left behind a record of its worst behavior. Rocks do not forget. They cannot explain themselves in words, but they store chemical memories with obsessive accuracy. To understand how the ancient ocean became so dangerous, scientists read these memories like detectives reconstructing a crime scene millions of years after the fact. The clues are subtle, but once you know how to look, they are everywhere. One of the most telling pieces of evidence comes in the form of black shales. These dark, fine-grained sedimentary rocks formed when organic material accumulated on the sea floor and was preserved rather than broken down. Under normal conditions, organic matter decays rapidly. When oxygen is present, microbes consume it efficiently, leaving little behind. Black shales tell a different story. They signal environments where decay slowed dramatically, allowing carbon-rich material to pile up and become locked into stone. The darkness of these shales is not decorative. It reflects high concentrations of organic carbon, often accompanied by minerals that form only in oxygen-poor conditions. These rocks appear in layers across multiple regions, suggesting that hostile conditions were not local accidents but widespread events. When geologists find black shales of the same age in distant locations, it is a strong hint that something global was happening in the oceans. Chemical signatures within these rocks provide even more detail. Certain elements change their behavior depending on the presence or absence of oxygen. Iron, for example, can exist in different chemical states, and those states leave distinct marks in sediments. By analyzing these patterns, scientists can infer whether the water above the seafloor was oxygenated or anoxic when the sediment formed. It is like reading the ocean's medical chart written in elemental shorthand. Sulfur compounds offer another set of clues. Isotopes of sulfur, atoms of the same element with slightly different masses, shift in predictable ways during microbial processes. When sulfur-reducing bacteria dominate, they leave behind a distinctive isotopic fingerprint. These fingerprints appear in sediments from the periods when the ocean became hostile, providing independent confirmation that toxic processes were widespread. Carbon isotopes also play a role. Changes in the ratio of carbon isotopes in sedimentary rocks reflect disruptions in the global carbon cycle. Large deviations suggest massive changes in how carbon moved between the ocean, atmosphere, and biosphere. These shifts align with times of ecological stress and extinction, reinforcing the picture of an ocean system pushed far from equilibrium. The spatial distribution of these rocks matters just as much as their chemistry. Black shales often appear in layers that correspond to ancient continental margins and shallow seas. Their placement helps reconstruct the shape of ocean basins and identify regions where circulation was restricted. In essence, the rocks map out where the ocean struggled most and where conditions tipped into danger. What makes this geological evidence so powerful is its consistency. Multiple independent signals, organic carbon, sulfur isotopes, metal concentrations, all point to the same conclusion. The ocean experienced prolonged intervals of low oxygen, chemical instability, and biological stress. This is not speculation. It is a pattern repeated across rock records, separated by vast distances. There is also a humbling time scale to this evidence. These rocks formed slowly, layer by layer, over thousands to millions of years. Each thin band represents a snapshot of conditions at the seafloor. Together, they create a timeline of decline and partial recovery. The ocean did not stumble briefly. It endured long periods of dysfunction, recorded patiently by settling sediments. From a storytelling perspective, black shales are the ultimate unreliable narrator that turns out to be very reliable. They do not exaggerate, they do not editorialize, they simply preserve. Their presence tells us that something prevented oxygen from doing its usual work, and that something persisted long enough to leave a global mark. By examining these geological fingerprints, scientists piece together a narrative that biology alone cannot provide. Fossils show who survived and who vanished. Rocks explain why. Together, they reveal an ocean that crossed chemical thresholds and stayed there, reshaping life in the process. The crime scene is ancient, but the evidence is fresh. Every core sample pulled from the seafloor is another page in the ocean's confession, and once you learn how to read it, the story becomes impossible to ignore. At some point in this already chaotic story, Earth decided to escalate. Quiet chemical drift and slow tectonic rearrangement were apparently not dramatic enough. So the planet reached for one of its favorite tools, volcanoes. Not the picturesque cone gently puffing smoke, but vast volcanic provinces that cracked open the crust and bled lava for thousands of years. When Earth has an issue, it does not always choose subtlety. Sometimes it chooses molten rock. These eruptions were not isolated events. They occurred on a scale that defies everyday intuition, covering enormous regions with layer upon layer of basalt. Lava flowed not just from mountains, but from long fissures that split the land like seams coming apart. Each eruption released staggering amounts of gases into the atmosphere, including carbon dioxide and other compounds that altered the planet's energy balance. The sky became an exhaust system with no off switch. The climatic impact of this volcanic activity was profound. Greenhouse gases accumulated, trapping heat and pushing global temperatures upward. Unlike short-lived volcanic winters caused by ash clouds, these eruptions created long-term warming. The planet did not get a brief fever. It developed a chronic condition. Oceans absorbed much of this heat, locking it into the system and amplifying stresses that were already straining marine life. Volcanoes also influenced ocean chemistry more directly. As volcanic rocks weathered, either on land or beneath the sea, they released minerals into surrounding waters. These inputs altered the chemical composition of seawater, changing nutrient availability and ion balance. While some nutrients can boost productivity, too much of anything disrupts equilibrium. The ocean became chemically overloaded, struggling to maintain stability amid constant input. Underwater volcanism added another layer of complexity. Lava interacting directly with seawater created localized zones of extreme conditions, including rapid heating and chemical reactions that altered surrounding waters. These were not nurturing hydrothermal oases. In this context, they acted as stress multipliers, injecting heat and reactive compounds into systems already on the edge. The ocean was being poked repeatedly while trying not to collapse. There is a cruel feedback loop at play here. Volcanic warming intensified conditions that favored chemical instability in the ocean. As the ocean changed, it became less capable of buffering atmospheric shifts, allowing greenhouse gases to persist longer. The planet's systems began reinforcing one another's worst tendencies. Lava begat heat, heat begat imbalance, imbalance begat more vulnerability. From a biological perspective, volcanic episodes were disastrous not because lava reached the seafloor everywhere, but because of the slow, pervasive changes they triggered. Marine organisms could not outrun climate shifts driven by atmospheric chemistry, They could not hide from altered seawater composition. Volcanoes acted like distant puppet masters, pulling strings that reshaped environments far from the eruptions themselves. There is also a timing element that makes volcanoes particularly effective agents of chaos. These eruptions lasted long enough to overwhelm short-term adaptive responses. Life can endure brief disturbances. It struggles with persistent ones. Volcanic activity did not deliver a single punch. It applied pressure steadily, ensuring that recovery never quite caught up with damage. The absurdity of it all is hard to ignore. Faced with environmental imbalance, Earth responded by melting its own surface and releasing gas clouds large enough to rewrite climate rules. It is the planetary equivalent of fixing a broken thermostat by setting the house on fire and hoping the temperature evens out eventually. Spoiler, it did not. By the time volcanic activity waned, the damage was already done. Oceans had warmed, chemistry had shifted, and ecosystems had been pushed past critical thresholds. Volcanoes did not act alone, but they played a decisive role in tipping the system from stressed to catastrophic. They were not villains with intent, just geological processes doing what they do best, releasing energy in spectacular, inconvenient ways. This chapter of Earth's history is a reminder that the planet does not prioritize comfort or continuity. Its internal dynamics operate on timescales and energies that care nothing for biology. When volcanoes speak, oceans listen. And in this case, what they heard helped turn the seas into one of the most dangerous places life had ever known. Once the oceans stabilized enough to support complex ecosystems again, evolution did not simply pick up where it left off. Too much had changed. Too many lineages were gone. Too many ecological roles sat empty, like abandoned storefronts waiting for new tenants. The post-crisis ocean was not a restored version of the old world. It was a reset environment, and evolution treated it like a fresh opportunity rather than a rebuilding project. One of the most profound impacts of this dangerous ocean phase was the permanent removal of dominant groups that had once defined marine life. When these lineages vanished, they took with them entire ways of living, feeding strategies, body plans, reproductive styles, all erased. Their absence mattered because it freed up ecological space. Evolution thrives on vacancies. Empty niches are invitations, and life RSVP'd enthusiastically. Surviving groups diversified rapidly, but not randomly. Traits that had proven useful during extreme stress became foundational. Tolerance to variable chemistry, flexible metabolism, and efficient energy use were suddenly premium features. Species that could handle a wider range of conditions outcompeted specialists. This shift favored adaptability over optimization. Being good enough at many things became more valuable than being excellent at one. Body size trends also shifted over the long term. The post-crisis ocean favored smaller, more efficient organisms initially. Smaller bodies require fewer resources, reproduce faster, and adapt more quickly. Over time, larger forms returned, but they were built on different principles. New giants emerged from lineages shaped by survival under pressure, not from the old titans that had fallen. Food webs reassembled with altered architecture. Instead of recreating previous hierarchies, ecosystems developed new relationships. Predation styles changed. Mobility increased in some groups, while others leaned into defensive strategies. The balance between predators and prey recalibrated, often more cautiously. The ocean's evolutionary experiment leaned towards stability through redundancy rather than dominance through power. The crisis also accelerated innovation in physiology. New ways of regulating internal chemistry appeared, allowing organisms to buffer themselves against environmental fluctuations. Improved respiratory systems, better circulation, and more controlled ion exchange became common features. These were not flashy adaptations, but they were transformative. They allowed life to exist in environments that would previously have been marginal at best. Reproductive strategies diversified as well. Some lineages favored rapid reproduction and wide dispersal, betting on numbers. Others invested heavily in fewer offspring with higher survival chances. These contrasting strategies coexisted, each effective in different contexts. The ocean became a laboratory of evolutionary bets, spread across countless species, trying slightly different approaches to the same fundamental problem: staying alive. Importantly, this period reshaped evolutionary trajectories for millions of years to come. Lineages that rose to prominence after the crisis went on to dominate future oceans. The dangerous ocean phase acted like a filter, determining which branches of the evolutionary tree would continue growing and which would end abruptly. Modern marine diversity still carries echoes of these ancient decisions. There is a subtle lesson in how evolution behaved here. It did not aim for complexity immediately. It aimed for resilience. Complexity returned later, layered on top of systems that could survive instability. The ocean learned, in evolutionary terms, that robustness mattered more than elegance. Life that endured chaos wrote the blueprint for future success. The humor, if we allow ourselves one, is that after nearly wiping itself out, life responded by becoming more adaptable, more inventive, and more persistent than before. The ocean tried to break biology, and biology responded by upgrading its software. By reshaping which traits were rewarded, this dangerous chapter permanently altered the course of marine evolution. The winners of this era were not the flashiest or strongest, but the most flexible. And from those survivors came the foundations of the rich, dynamic oceans that would follow. When the ocean finally became livable again, evolution did not rush to rebuild what had been lost. There was no nostalgia in biology, no effort to restore the classic lineup of ancient marine life. Too many doors had closed permanently. Instead, evolution treated the post-crisis ocean like a cleared stage, open to new experiments, new strategies, and new winners. What followed was not a return to normal, but the birth of a fundamentally different marine world. One of the most lasting impacts of these dangerous oceans was the pruning of the evolutionary tree. Entire branches disappeared, not just individual species. This mattered because evolution is constrained by history. Once a lineage is gone, its unique toolkit is gone with it. Feeding mechanisms, skeletal designs, metabolic tricks, all erased. Future life had to work with what survived, and that reshaped what kinds of organisms could ever exist again. The survivors shared certain traits that became disproportionately influential. Flexibility topped the list. Species that could tolerate shifts in temperature, chemistry, and oxygen levels gained an enormous advantage in the unstable aftermath. This select group became the raw material for future diversification. Their descendants inherited bodies and physiologies already stress-tested by catastrophe, giving them a head start in a world that no longer promised stability. Evolutionary innovation accelerated, but in a very specific direction. Instead of elaborate specialization, early post-crisis life favored modular designs. Simpler body plans that could be tweaked gradually proved more successful than complex structures that required precise conditions. This allowed diversification without fragility. New species emerged that were not perfect at anything, but capable of surviving almost anywhere. In evolutionary terms, mediocrity became a superpower. Ecological roles were also redefined. With former dominance gone, new groups expanded into positions they had never occupied before. Some lineages that had once been minor background players rose to prominence, not because they were superior in absolute terms, but because no one else was left to compete. The ocean's hierarchy was rewritten, and power shifted to organisms built for endurance rather than dominance. Predation itself evolved under new rules. Instead of relying solely on size or strength, many predators adopted strategies based on efficiency, ambush, and sensory precision. Energy budgets mattered more than brute force. This reshaped arms races between predators and prey, leading to new forms of camouflage, mobility, and behavioral complexity. The ocean became quieter, subtler, and in some ways smarter. Reproductive strategies also felt the long shadow of the crisis. Many lineages leaned into approaches that spread risk. Some produced large numbers of offspring with minimal investment, betting on chance. Others did the opposite, producing fewer offspring but guarding them carefully or provisioning them generously. Both strategies reflected lessons learned during instability. Survival was unpredictable, and no single approach guaranteed success. The pace of evolutionary change during this period was uneven. Some lineages diversified explosively, filling vacant niches rapidly. Others remained relatively unchanged for long stretches, persisting as stable forms in stable environments. This created a patchwork of evolutionary tempos across the ocean, with innovation hotspots and conservative strongholds existing side by side. Crucially, these long-term impacts shaped the direction of future marine ecosystems. Once new food webs stabilized, they were built on different foundations than before. The flow of energy, the balance of ecosystems, and the interactions between species followed new patterns. Even when diversity eventually rebounded, it did so along altered pathways. The ocean's biological personality had changed. There is a quiet lesson here about how catastrophe influences creativity. Evolution does not innovate best under ideal conditions. It innovates when forced to. The dangerous oceans acted as an evolutionary filter, removing fragile designs and amplifying resilient ones. The result was not a weaker biosphere, but one better suited to a dynamic planet. By reshaping which traits survived and which vanished, this chapter determined who would dominate the oceans for hundreds of millions of years afterward. The modern richness of marine life owes its existence, in part, to this brutal reset. The ocean nearly erased itself, and in doing so, wrote the blueprint for everything that came next. When scientists study ancient oceans, they are not doing it out of idle curiosity or nostalgia for a time when everything smelled faintly of sulfur. They are looking for patterns, warning signs, familiar sequences of events that tell them not just what happened, but how it happened. And when they compare those ancient dangerous oceans to the modern one, the resemblance is close enough to make even the calmest researcher grip their coffee a little tighter. The modern ocean is warming. That fact alone is not unprecedented. Oceans have warmed before, many times. What unsettles scientists is the speed. Heat is being added faster than many marine systems can adjust. Warm water behaves differently, just as it did in the past, forming stronger layers and resisting mixing. The ocean begins to separate into chemical neighborhoods that do not talk to each other as much as they used to. That silence is rarely a good sign. Alongside warming comes deoxygenation. Measurements from today's oceans show expanding low oxygen zones, sometimes called dead zones, where complex life struggles to survive. These regions are not yet global catastrophes, but they are growing. Oxygen levels decline quietly, often without visible surface changes. That subtlety is what makes scientists uneasy. Ancient oceans also did not announce their oxygen loss with fireworks. They simply became harder to breathe in, one layer at a time. Acidification is the third member of this troubling trio. As modern oceans absorb increasing amounts of carbon dioxide, seawater chemistry shifts. The process is well understood, and its effects are already observable. Shell-forming organisms show stress, coral structures weaken, early life stages fail more often. None of this looks dramatic in isolation. Together, it forms a pattern that feels uncomfortably familiar. What alarms scientists most is not any single change, but how these changes interact. Warming encourages stratification. Stratification limits oxygen renewal. Acidification stresses organisms already struggling with low oxygen. Each factor amplifies the others. In Earth's past, this kind of teamwork led to cascading failures. No one is claiming history will repeat itself exactly, but the rhyme is loud enough to hear through layers of sediment. There is also the matter of scale. Modern human activity influences the entire planet simultaneously. Ancient changes unfolded over long timescales driven by geology. Today's changes are compressed into centuries. That compression matters. Ecosystems that once had time to adapt gradually are now asked to adjust quickly. Evolution is powerful, but it is not fast on human schedules. Scientists studying ancient oceans see how thresholds work. Systems can absorb stress up to a point, then shift suddenly into a new state. These tipping points are hard to predict precisely, but they are very real. Once crossed, recovery becomes slow and difficult. The ancient record shows that oceans do not always bounce back easily, even when conditions improve. That memory makes modern observations feel heavier. Importantly, drawing parallels does not mean declaring doom. Ancient oceans also show recovery. Life endured, adapted, and diversified again. But the cost was enormous, measured in lost diversity and reshaped ecosystems. The lesson is not that change equals extinction, but that combined stresses reduce options. They narrow the pathways life can take forward. There is a cautious humility in how scientists talk about this. They do not say the modern ocean will become a toxic wasteland. They say the conditions that once led to dangerous oceans are appearing together again. That combination, not any single factor, is what history flags as risky. It is like seeing storm clouds, falling pressure, and rising winds all at once. None guarantee a hurricane, but together they demand attention. The humor here is nervous humor, an unwanted sequel where the plot elements are recognizable, but the outcome is uncertain. Scientists are not rooting for a remake. They are trying to change the script while it is still being written. Ancient oceans offer a preview of how bad the story can get if left unchecked. Ultimately, these parallels exist because Earth's systems follow physical and chemical rules. The planet does not remember the past emotionally, but it repeats behaviors when conditions align. By studying how prehistoric oceans became dangerous, scientists gain insight into how close modern systems might be to similar thresholds. This chapter is not a prophecy, it is a comparison, a reminder that the ocean has limits and history has receipts. When warming, oxygen loss, and acidification show up together, scientists do not panic, but they do pay very close attention. They have seen this movie before, and they know how expensive the ending can be. When you step back from the details, from the gases and rocks and vanished creatures, what remains is a strangely simple story. The prehistoric ocean did not collapse because of malice, intention, or some cosmic accident. It became dangerous because its balance shifted, slowly enough to go unnoticed and thoroughly enough to change everything. No villains twirled mustaches. No single disaster pressed a big red button. Earth simply followed its own rules, and life discovered how unforgiving those rules can be. At the beginning of this story, the ocean was functional, if imperfect. It supported ecosystems adapted to its conditions. It moved energy, materials, and life around the planet with quiet efficiency. Over time, small changes accumulated. Heat lingered, movement slowed, chemistry drifted. None of these changes were dramatic on their own. Together, they transformed the ocean from a life support system into a life-filtering machine. What makes this transformation so unsettling is how ordinary it was. The same processes that usually stabilize Earth, circulation, chemical exchange, biological feedbacks, became destabilizing when pushed beyond certain limits. The ocean did not break because something went wrong. It broke because too many things went right at the same time, just in the wrong direction. Life responded as it always does, with adaptation, persistence, and stubborn creativity. Some organisms vanished, others endured. A few thrived under conditions that would have seemed impossible before. Evolution did not stop. It narrowed, it simplified, it waited. Eventually, it rebuilt. The ocean did not remain dangerous forever, but it stayed that way long enough to permanently reshape the trajectory of life on Earth. There is a quiet lesson in this arc. Stability is not guaranteed, even in systems that appear vast and resilient. The ocean feels infinite to human senses, but it operates within chemical and physical boundaries. Cross enough of them, and even the largest ecosystem on the planet can change character. The sea did not lose life entirely, it lost its generosity. Another lesson is that danger does not always look dangerous at first. The surface remained calm, the water still sparkled. From above, nothing seemed wrong. The crisis unfolded invisibly, in layers and reactions beyond easy observation. By the time consequences became obvious, they were already entrenched. Earth does not announce tipping points, it reveals them in hindsight. There is also something oddly reassuring in the absence of villains. No single force can be blamed, which means no single force is required to fix things. The same systems that drove collapse eventually allowed recovery. Given time and the right conditions, the ocean healed itself, not perfectly, not painlessly, but enough to support life again. Earth is not fragile, but it is sensitive. The humor in this conclusion is subtle and a little dark. The planet nearly wiped out marine life without trying very hard. It did not need asteroids or alien invasions, just patience, chemistry, and a few feedback loops working overtime. It is a reminder that Earth is extremely capable, and not always in ways we appreciate. Looking back at this prehistoric ocean, it is tempting to see it as a cautionary tale. That is not wrong, but it is incomplete. It is also a story about endurance, adaptability, and the long view of life. Even after becoming too dangerous for most organisms, the ocean did not remain barren. Life persisted, learned, and diversified in new ways. The ending was not extinction, it was transformation. As this story closes, the ocean returns to being what it has always been: powerful, dynamic, and indifferent to comfort. It does not promise safety, it offers opportunity within limits. When those limits are respected, life flourishes. When they are crossed, the ocean changes the terms. The prehistoric ocean became dangerous not because it wanted to, but because it could. And that is perhaps the most important reminder of all. Earth does not need villains to rewrite the rules of life. It only needs time, chemistry, and a slight imbalance. The rest follows naturally, whether life is ready or not.